Coming up on Bridge City News, a pathway project in Lethbridge worth almost $2 million has been shot down by Lethbridge City Council. The Alberta government is introducing a new bill which would protect business owners who break their commercial leases. And a powerful story about how Samaritan's Purse is helping people in the Bahamas rebuild their lives following last fall's devastating hurricane which destroyed many homes.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. By a 7-2 vote, Lethbridge City Council has decided to cancel the $1.75 million 6-mile Cooley pathway project. Council also asked city staff to come up with a new way to improve the safety and sustainability of the popular trail system. Some of the improvements would have included adding limestone to the first 3 kilometers of the trail. Current users were opposed to the idea, saying the changes would have disrupted the more natural state of the trail. Lethbridge City Councillor Blaine Higgins sponsored the motion to rescind the $1.75 million in construction funding.
We spoke with a lot of different organizations throughout that use that pathway on a regular basis, and they just thought that there was no reason to change it. Furthermore, to put $1.75 million into changing it when everybody was happy with the way that it was. When I say everybody, majority of the emails that I received, actually 100% of the emails I received were in favor of canceling this, rescinding this particular resolution. I guess the old terminology goes, if it's not broken, don't fix it. People were happy the way that it was. It's unfortunate that there was $136,000, I believe, that went into preparing to do this. So that was lost money, which was quite frustrating to me, but at least it is not going through.
Lethbridge County presented the town of Coaldale with a check for almost $91,500. The funding will go towards upgrading some of the town's recreation facilities, including pools and skating arenas. The money is part of the county's $470,000 commitment to the town over the next 5 years. Reeve Lauren Hickey says the extra funding will help accommodate growing populations or construct new facilities as they're needed. The Old Man River that runs through our city can be a source of joy and perfect for outdoor activities. However, sometimes the water can get unruly and dangerous. Lethbridge Fire and EMS had a training session on Wednesday morning, and BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly was there to catch the action.
The Lethbridge Fire Department just acquired 2 new boats to help them with search and rescue training. Fire and EMS trainees learn a variety of life-saving skills on the water.
There's so many different disciplines within the water rescue team. You have to be able to have the skills to use the boat, there's the diving, there's using the sonar when you're looking for things in the lake and stuff. So there's so many different things to think about, and there's a lot of guys with specific skill sets within this team. So it's really cool. You can kind of do a lot of things in the team.
Important for our guys to be trained up not only on the operation of our boats, but the area familiarization, just so we know what hazards are out there, how our boats are going to respond in a certain situation. Right now we've got the luxury of doing our training while the river's high, but we'll have to come back out later on in the year when the river's lower because it presents different hazards as the water drops down.
24 water rescue team members took part in training this year. Water rescue team lead Brendan Pine says that it's important to keep in mind specific safety protocols, especially if you're a non-swimmer.
Make sure you have a PFD. That's very important. If you can't swim, have a PFD. For sure.
With COVID-19 restrictions being lifted and the weather getting nicer, more people will bring water activities to the Old Man River. First responders say it's important to be prepared for the worst.
Yeah, hopefully we can be out training and be ready for, hopefully worst case scenario, but we got to be ready. So
for Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Getting a driver's license of any sort is a privilege, and that rite of passage had to wait since driving schools were shut down during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're now able to open under Phase 2 of Alberta's reopening plan. BCN's Loris Alexander explains why this is great news for the instructor and student alike.
We just found out a couple of days ago they're opening it up. Everything's got fluid, right? So nothing's consistent right now, and we're in the same boat. We're changing things daily just to keep up with the rules and make sure everybody's good.
With everything shut down for the last 3 months, it's like the whole economy was put on pause, and especially trying to do training and get back into the workforce, it made it extremely difficult. So it seems like things are finally opening up again, and it's a real blessing to get back in and sort of get involved in training and back into the economy.
Testing commences tomorrow, and there are some familiar rules that will apply.
We have to keep everybody 6 feet apart and have to wear a mask if you break the 6-foot rule. And the drivers, all my drivers are wearing masks in the truck. Our classes are all separated 6 feet apart, so we have classroom time, everything's sitting at 6 feet apart, so our classes are smaller than they used to be.
Gateway Safety Services shut its doors completely on March 20th for about 6 weeks. They have since reopened about a month ago.
Everybody knows we're open again, and we deal with the industry here, so it's pretty steady now. We're getting more and more calls every day, and a lot of companies are releasing the rules. A lot of companies had rules. There's no training until the end of June or no training down in July. They're starting to release those rules too, so we're starting to see the corporations coming back too.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Major grocery store chains announced recently that the extra $2 an hour they were paying employees during the COVID-19 pandemic may be disappearing. Now, according to our political reporter Brian Lilly, some of the CEOs of those companies may be called before Parliament to explain themselves.
Grocery sales are up. Profits are up. This is a really bad look for the companies, especially in areas where there are still cases. If you are in rural Manitoba, there are no cases of COVID-19. Do you need the $2 extra per hour for those workers? Probably not. But if you're in a metro in, on the island of Montreal or here in Toronto or other places where there are still cases and where it is still an issue and a concern, you might want to offer this to those workers at the least.
Catch the full interview with the always colorful Brian Lilly coming up in the second half of our show. Building Brains Together has been working with families and their children to help with research initiatives, online education for parents, and activities for kids up to the age of 6. As Micah Quinn explains, the company is trying to establish connections and brain development for children through research and education.
Building connections with children and talking with parents to give them the resources to build their child's brain development is the goal of Building Brains Together. Dr. Robin Gibb is a professor in the Department of Neuroscience at the University of Lethbridge. She's one of the founders of the organization.
Well, we have learned that the number one way to build a brain in a healthy way is to have a positive, nurturing connection with an adult. So typically that would be parents, but it also extends to preschool teachers, caregivers, grandparents, aunts and uncles, anybody who can be that nurturing relationship for a child. So it builds connection in ways that help this child put together brain function in ways that help them be much more successful as they go through life.
Gibbs says the recruitment process for parents for the program was a success.
And the lovely thing is the reports we got back from their parents, the noticeable changes in their behavior at home. So we were working in the school settings and doing the playing, but the parents at home were saying, my gosh, they seem far more emotionally stable when something doesn't go right, or they don't have a fit if things don't work out the way they had planned, or they can wait their turn better, so on and so forth.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The City of Calgary has given the green light to a light rail transit project. Council voted 14-1 in favor of a revised plan for Stage 1 of the $4.9 billion line that would link North Central to southeastern Calgary. Ottawa and the province have each pledged around $1.5 billion towards the project. Construction on the first segment of Stage 1 could begin next spring. There are now 7,530 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Alberta, but fortunately, 6,893 people have since recovered. That's according to the province of Alberta. Sadly, however, 151 people have died from the virus. In the South Zone, where we are, there are currently 29 active cases with only one person in hospital. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, says while many Albertans are happy to be going back to work as we open up more of the economy, others are feeling a little more anxious about it.
For some, this is an exciting step. For others, anticipating this change may be causing moderate or even severe anxiety. Anxiety and fear can be triggered by change and uncertainty, and we have had a great deal of both in the last few months. Learning to live with uncertainty is one of the hardest things that any of us can do, and we have been challenged in this time of COVID to hone this skill. Our knowledge of COVID continues to evolve, as does our approach to prevention, as we seek to balance all the needs we have for human connection, meaningful employment, and protection from infectious disease.
A bill imposing tougher penalties on protesters who set up blockades at oil pipelines and other essential infrastructure has passed into law. Bill 1 has received royal assent in Alberta. The new law makes it a crime to destroy, damage, or interfere with infrastructure, including highways, utilities, and oil and gas facilities. Individual offenders are subject to fines of $1,000 for a first offense and $10,000 to $25,000 for future violations. Premier Jason Kenney says he will consider acting on recommendations of a panel created to look at better ways for Alberta to assert itself in Confederation. Kenney says he will explore cutting the province's ties with the RCMP and leaving the Canada Pension Plan to set up the Alberta Pension Plan. He also wants to hold a referendum next year to discuss reforming the equalization program. Kenney says we are getting an unfair deal because we're sending more money to Ottawa than we're getting back. The Alberta government introduced a new bill which it said would protect the interests of commercial tenants. Officials say Bill 23 would prevent leases from being terminated with tenants due to non-payment of rent as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. If passed, the act would also prevent landlords from raising rent and charging late fees and penalties on missed rent. The government says the new measures would help address shortfalls in the current Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. It would also give eligible business owners peace of mind as they reopen. The legislation would cover the period from March 17th to August 31st. The government in Saskatchewan has introduced legislation to prevent municipalities from banning firearms, including handguns. The province says it's because Ottawa plans to pass legislation intended to delegate to municipalities the ability to ban such weapons. Government Relations Minister Laurie Carr says Saskatchewan's legislation will better protect the rights of legal firearm and handgun owners. She says the Moe government prefers to encourage education and safety while taking a tough stance on criminals who break existing laws. Saskatchewan is about to lift more COVID-19 restrictions. Now, beginning Monday, the limit on outdoor gatherings is doubling to 30 people. The province also plans to allow day camps, outdoor pools, and sports for kids to go ahead. Health officials say outdoor activities are fairly safe and that physical distancing rules still must be followed. Blood samples collected from tens of thousands of Canadians will soon be tested for signs of COVID-19 antibodies as Ottawa seeks to learn how many people have already contracted the novel coronavirus. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Teresa Tam says our country's immunity task force is collaborating with Canadian Blood Services on the project.
I know that the acquisition of the serologic test is actually very rapidly being completed right now, and there should be further news on that very soon.
After postponing a fiscal update indefinitely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising his government will deliver a snapshot of the federal government's finances in the House of Commons on July the 8th. With millions of workers left jobless by businesses which have closed down, revenues have plunged and expenses have soared.
We have put forward all the information from finance to the finance committee, to parliamentarians on the measures that we have moved forward on to give a very precise accounting on what we've done. We've continued to do that, and in a few weeks we will gather all that together along with a sense of where we are, comparisons to where we are compared to other countries, and some estimates on where we could be in the coming months.
Canada has lost its bid for a temporary seat on the United Nations Security Council. Norway and Ireland were chosen instead on a first ballot. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was already indicating before the vote that Canada will continue to engage other countries on important matters regardless of the outcome. He denied it would be a loss for him personally. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the RCMP releases too little information on how they enforce the law. He says that changes need to be made when it comes to the Mounties' accountability.
There needs to be better work when it comes to investigations of complaints of police services. We found that throughout Canada, this is an ongoing concern that the investigations are not conducted in a way where people are left feeling satisfied that it was thorough and that it was independent. And so those concerns are legitimate, particularly when there isn't a separate or independent body that's doing the investigations, when it is the RCMP itself. Also, we need to have the data that the RCMP does collect released and better data keeping and tracking so that we can make better decisions about where systemic racism is being exhibited, whether it's in the use of force or the arrests or the detention or stopping of people based on the color of their skin. We need the evidence to, again, refine and improve policies. But we know that these anecdotally are happening. We know that systemic racism is happening. So more accountability and yes, independent investigations would help to move forward in a positive way.
Following weeks of national protests since the death of George Floyd, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an order encouraging better police practices and to establish a database to keep track of excessive use of force complaints. He also discussed the importance of the police.
To all of the hurting families, I want you to know that all Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain. We have to find common ground. But I strongly oppose the radical and dangerous efforts to defend, dismantle, and dissolve our police departments, especially now when we've achieved the lowest recorded crime rates in recent history. Americans know the truth. Without police, there is chaos. Without law, there is anarchy. And without safety, there is catastrophe.
Samaritan's Purse is continuing to serve hurting business owners in the Bahamas by removing debris from their homes and repairing roofs following the devastation caused by Hurricane Dorian last September. As we hear in this next report, it really is a collaborative effort.
Well, after the storm, total shock, and then of course there's the tears. I guess one word, unbelievable.
The first time this ever happened, it was very scary. I cried for a couple of days.
I never been through nothing like that in my entire life.
It's just God's protection. It's just the hand of God that kept us.
Since first arriving, we arrived after a pretty traumatic event for everyone. You're not operating as you used to, and slowly but surely, there's been progress. Our current program is debris removal and the shelter program, mucking and gutting people's homes which have been damaged from the hurricane. Taking what's been damaged away has also been just lightening the load on people.
Thank the Lord for Samaritan's Purse has done so much to help us get back on our feet.
It's everyone pitching in together. It's local people, Samaritan's Purse, all working together to essentially move debris and to move on from this destruction.
It's really a blessing to see how God has used even the bad storm to bring people together and to allow people to be part of the recovery, to be part of the healing, to lend helping hand.
This storm has given us the opportunity, working through you all, to share the gospel of Christ.
They did a lot for us. They tell us whatever they can assist us with, don't hesitate, let them know. With Samaritan Purse scheme in here, I can say it's been a blessing to me and my family.
That was so nice to see. It was a wet one today in many parts of southwestern Alberta, and that trend will continue for the short term. Full weather details are coming up. We had more shower activity again today with cooler temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we can hold off washing our dirty vehicles since Mother Nature may be able to take care of that for us.
Yeah, washing your car, probably not the best idea right now, as we are going to be seeing quite a bit of rain. In fact, 5 millimeters is expected this evening, and we could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well overnight. Overnight low, cooler temperature there, 8 degrees. Into tomorrow, though, we are going to see the skies clear, the sun's going to come out again. We should see mainly sunny skies for our Thursday with a high of 18 degrees. 6 degrees is the overnight low on Thursday night. Now, let's take a look at the 5-day temperature. As we look ahead to Friday, 60% chance of showers on Friday, 21 is the high. As we get into Saturday, sunshine for the weekend. Sunny skies for Saturday, high of 24. Should be a lovely day. 21 is the high on Saturday with mainly sunny skies as well. A mix of sun and cloud on Monday and Tuesday. 22 the high for Monday and 25 for next Tuesday. And as we see those temperatures starting to creep back up there. The average high for this time of year, 23 degrees. Average low, 9. The high temperature on this day was back in 1988. It was 32 degrees. And that low temperature, 1 degree back in 2000. The sun got up this morning at 5:23 a.m. Our evening sunset, 9:42 p.m. Look at that. That's almost 10 p.m. I just love to see the daylight stay out later and later as we are getting closer to summer. Sunshine on the west coast tomorrow, 21 is the high for Victoria, 19 for Vancouver. Edmonton and Calgary, mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, 17 is the high there. They're going to be seeing similar weather this evening though, with the chance of rain overnight, but it's going to clear up for tomorrow. Saskatoon could see 5 to 10 millimeters of rain overnight and into tomorrow. 11 is their high. Also for Regina, chance of showers. Winnipeg could see a risk of a thunderstorm this evening, and a mix of sun and cloud with some showers tomorrow. Sunshine expected in Toronto tomorrow, 28 degrees. Look at these temperatures here. Ottawa 31, Montreal 34. Keep in mind those temperatures actually will feel hotter than that with the humidex, as this area is developing a lot of humidity. Fredericton's high tomorrow, 34 degrees. Again, it's going to be hotter feeling with the humidex. Charlottetown's high, 30. Halifax, 32. Look at all that sunshine. Humidex index is very high as well. They're going to feel hotter there. 23 is the high for St. John's, Newfoundland, with a mix of sun and cloud. There you go. That is your weather.
Canada experienced negative inflation for a second month in a row last month as businesses shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Stats Canada says inflation fell 0.4% compared to a year ago, following a 0.2% pullback in April. The agency says lower gas prices from a year ago was the main contributor, with the annual inflation rate hitting 0.7% with gas excluded. Food prices were up just over 3%, with the largest annual year-over-year increase among the major components. The Mexican government says it will not send any more temporary foreign workers to Canada until it has more clarity on why 2 people died due to COVID-19. The Mexican ambassador to Canada says he needs answers as to why 2 men died and what's being done to prevent similar tragic outcomes. Officials say 5,000 temporary foreign workers expected to arrive in Canada will be held back. Ambassador Juan Camacho says 300 Mexicans currently working in Canada are infected with COVID-19. The owner of Uncle Ben's brand of rice says the brand will evolve in response to concerns about racial stereotyping. The announcement comes just hours after Quaker Oats said it was retiring its Aunt Jemima brand of syrup and pancake mixes. A spokesperson for Uncle Ben's parent company, Mars, says it is listening to voices of consumers, especially those in the Black community. Company officials say now is the right time to evolve the brand. Ottawa recently promised the oil and gas sector $1 billion to help clean up abandoned oil wells. Is that enough? David Yeager is an energy policy analyst, and he says it's a start, but really, what is next for our hard-hit energy sector?
The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how.
Mr. Yeager will have more on how the energy sector will try and rebuild its industry coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 87 points to finish the day at 15,428. The Dow was down 170 to 26,119. The S&P 500 was down 11 on the day to 3113. The Nasdaq was up 14 points to finish at 99.10. Oil was down 67 cents to 37.71 per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to $1.64. Gold was down 6 cents to $17.2689 an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $17.51 an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton, barley's at $246, canola's at $474, and corn is at $233 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 18 cents to $96.65, feeder cattle were up 70 cents to $133.85, and lean hogs were unchanged at $49.85. The Canadian dollar was also unchanged on the day at 73.72 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge City Council has decided to cancel the $1.75 million 6-mile Cooley Pathway project. Council also asked city staff to come up with a new way to improve the safety and sustainability of the popular trail system. Some of the improvements would have included adding limestone to the first 3 kilometers of the trail. Current users were opposed to the idea, saying the changes would have disrupted the more natural state of the trail. A senator in Saskatchewan is calling for RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki to be fired. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have the details in just a moment. Most of Canada is moving away from lockdown mode during the COVID-19 pandemic, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently announced that the Canada Emergency Response Benefit will be extended for another 8 weeks. This may be causing some concern for employers. To talk more about it is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Brian, are people not wanting to go back to work?
No, they're not. And a lot of people are nervous about going back to work. Others are saying, well, I was only getting 15, 20 hours a week. I say that I've not working due to COVID, I can get $2,000 a month for staying home and doing nothing. If you're working full time, it doesn't matter where you are in the country. If you're working full time, minimum wage is going to be more than $2,000 a month. But if you're working part time, you might be getting a pay raise based on this CERB. Or maybe it's a bit of a wash for you and you just say, well, it's $2,000 and I don't have to leave home. I can stay home. I can look after the kids. I can, the whole gamut of things. It could be you just want to stay home and play video games. Who knows? Employers are telling government we are having trouble getting people to go back to work. So watch for this to be an issue, one that the government's going to have to carefully dance around, because Justin Trudeau has been all about spending money. He's been all about making sure that every group is looked after, that they get cash. He was even reluctant to go after people that were committing fraud. If you remember, we talked about that several weeks ago. Civil servants were saying, hey, wait a minute, we've got maybe 200,000 people collecting this that shouldn't be getting it. That works out to $400 million a month. And they just said, oh, don't worry about it, keep paying it. Now they realize, okay, this is turning into multi-billion-dollar fraud. They've started to say they'll crack down on it. But how do they walk back the CERB? How do they say, you're no longer going to get this money, go out and work? A lot of people will be angry and upset, and I think there is still a possibility of a fall election. Justin Trudeau doesn't like this minority thing. He wants to go back to majority territory. Taking money away from people doesn't win you votes.
But he has the support of the NDP right now for non-confidence votes, so as long as he keeps doling out the money, maybe the NDP will support him. Will that be enough, though?
Well, the NDP support him, but not on going after people who are fraudulent. We're not when the Liberal government says we're going after people that shouldn't be getting CERB. They're not talking about someone who applied in good faith, thinking they were eligible, and they're not, but they're still getting it. We're talking about people who were actively trying to defraud the government, and the NDP doesn't even want them to go after that. So, in this current situation, they actually have to find ways to strike deals, one-offs perhaps at different times with each of the parties, because they've all got their areas or issues that they want looked after, and the government needs to find compromise with them.
A story we recently aired on BCN was how the Canada-U.S. border will remain closed until at least July 21st, outside of the the essential workers. Brian, what is really driving this?
At the beginning, it was cases in border states, places like Washington in British Columbia, or Michigan, which borders Ontario, New York State, which borders Ontario and Quebec.
And Montana here with Alberta. So there you go. We're really close.
But Montana didn't have a lot of cases. But those other three had a ton of cases. They were absolute basket cases. Now you're starting to see California go back up. You're starting to see Arizona. You're starting to see COVID resurface in a lot of areas. And as the U.S. starts to see spikes again before they're even ready to hit a second wave, Canadian officials are saying, whoa, wait a minute, we're not liking the look of this. So that's kind of what's driving it right now, be it North Carolina or Arizona or California, rather than our initial fear, which was it's right on the border.
Brian, let's talk about pandemic pay for grocery workers. The extra $2 an hour disappeared as quickly as it came. Now, the major chains announced last week that they would be cutting it, and now CEOs of those companies may be called before Parliament to explain themselves.
Yeah, it was miraculous that the pay seemed to disappear on the same day for Metro, for Sobeys, for Loblaws, for Walmart. I'm going off memory, but if memory serves, I think Metro, when the pay came in, Metro announced, we're going to offer this. And then Loblaws quickly followed, and they were all kind of went along within a couple of days. I think it was last Friday, just boom, pandemic pays over. That leaves bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I was listening to talk radio here in Toronto, and the host was taking calls on this, and he was getting people calling up and saying, wait a minute, didn't Loblaws get millions for new fridges? Yeah. And they fixed the price of bread for years, and now they're taking this $2 away? Look, grocery sales are up. Profits are up. This is a really bad look for the companies, especially in areas where there are still cases. If you are in rural Manitoba, there are no cases of COVID-19. Do you need the $2 extra per hour for those workers? Probably not. But if you're in a metro in, on the island of Montreal or here in Toronto or other places where there are still cases and where it is still an issue and a concern, you might want to offer this to those workers at the least. Instead, they have taken it away all at once. They've announced when it's going to end. And now MPs are saying, well, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. We want to talk to you. So they're in discussions to have them appear before a Commons committee to answer for how this came about. It does look a little fishy when they all announce it at the same time.
The Royal Canadian Navy's Cyclone helicopters will be back in the air soon. Now, the announcement comes as the military revealed the crash in Greece was caused by conflict between the pilot and the chopper.
Yeah, such a strange term of phrase for them to use, and then not really giving an explanation as to what the conflict was, but that something was going on between the helicopter and the pilot. We're assuming the automated pilot system, the automated flight system, and the pilot in conflict with each other, and then the helicopter went down within sight. Now, they probably know more than they are saying right now. This is a habit of the Canadian military. And you'll recall at the beginning, they made it sound like nobody had seen anything, and we don't really know what happened. And we found out days later, after the first news conference with the Chief of Defense Staff, with the Prime Minister, with the Defense Minister, that helicopter went down within sight of the ship that it was supposed to land back on. It went down with the Royal Canadian Navy crew watching it happen, their comrades. So my guess is that they know more than they're letting on right now. They grounded the entire Cyclone fleet at the time. They've since said that they'll be back up in the air within days. So I'm guessing by the end of the week, there'll be the crews that operate the Cyclones will be back up. But there's still a lot of questions that need answers here. It's just going to be difficult getting them from a military that doesn't like to answer to the civilians that fund them.
With more calls of tackling racism around the world, we're seeing statues being torn down, also streets being renamed. Brian, you recently asked our Prime Minister about dropping Sir Wilfrid Laurier from the name of the top Liberal Donors Club. Why is that?
Well, the top Liberal donors, if you give enough, you get to join something called the Laurier Club, and it's quite prestigious. Laurier is a hero within the Liberal Party. I remember going to one Liberal organizer's house, and people have up pictures of the Pope or presidents. They had Laurier hanging in their dining room. They're so proud of him, and he was the first Francophone Canadian Prime Minister. A lot of great accomplishments, and even some conservatives consider him to be one of the great prime ministers of the 20th century. But while he was known for an immigration policy that brought in record numbers of people, put farmers on land straight across the prairies, he also had a very racist immigration policy by today's standards, and probably even by 1903 standards. He took the Chinese head tax from $50 per person to $500 per person because Sir John A. Macdonald had brought it in at $50. They said, this isn't working. We're still getting too many people that we don't want here. They upped it. That's the equivalent of more than $2,000 in today's money. They had a policy that said you cannot have immigration from India because they said if your boat can't sail, remember there were no planes back then, if your boat can't sail directly to Canada, you can't come. The only country they were worried about that was India. And boats coming from India had to stop before they left Asia to cross the Pacific to refuel or they wouldn't make it. And then finally, there were several instances where he discouraged Black American farmers from places like Oklahoma from coming up. They sent agents down to tell them Canada's no good for you. And in 1911, he even signed an order in council, a cabinet order, banning black immigrants. And the language in it, I don't think I could use on this television station without causing myself and yourself an awful lot of headaches, Hal. So that's the background for why the question. And I wanted to know, okay, this is something the Prime Minister could do without going to Parliament or going to bureaucrats. He essentially runs the Liberal Party. If we're going to change Langevin Block, which used to be the name of the building that the Prime Minister's office is in Ottawa, if we're going to change that, well, we know he's got a record of doing this sort of thing. What about the Laurier Club? Or what about James McGill, the man who, Justin Trudeau is a very proud alumnus of McGill University in Montreal. James McGill owned slaves. He owned slaves up until the time he died, when he bequested the money to start the university that bears his name today. He didn't really give me a direct answer, but he did say, we've got to take these things on a case-by-case basis. And I don't disagree with them. But if we're going to start tearing down statues or ripping up street names or changing place names, we need to have a conversation about it. One, we need to learn our full history, because I think what I've said will shock a lot of people. But secondly, how are we judging people? How far back are we going? What's the litmus test? What's the cutoff? Do we simply put up a plaque and tell the full story that this person was flawed? We're all flawed human beings. So that's why I was asking him. He didn't, as I said, he didn't fully answer, but he did say we've got to take this one at a time.
A Saskatchewan senator is calling for the RCMP Commissioner Bryan to be fired because she does not understand racism. This comes at the same time as a lot of criticism over the video of the arrest of Chief Alan Adams. Tell me more about that.
Well, Brenda Lucki, the RCMP commissioner, had said one day last week that there is no systemic racism in the RCMP. And then later that day or the next day, I can't remember the exact timing, the video, the dash cam video of Chief Alan Adams being arrested was released. Now, everyone's got to remember, this was a stop for a license tag that was expired. Most police officers aren't going after license tags, a little sticker on the back of your license plate. They're not going after that in the middle of the pandemic because it's tough to renew these things. We've been told in Ontario just to let them go. And Chief Alan Adams wasn't driving. You see in the video one officer trying to defuse the situation. Chief Adams at one point threatens to fight him. The officer defuses it. Things are, starting to go a bit better. And then as the first officer is arresting Chief Adams, the second officer comes flying in with a flying tackle. The timing of those two incidents, Commissioner Lucki's words and this video couldn't be worse for the RCMP. They're dealing with shootings of Indigenous Canadians across the country that are being called questionable. They're dealing with all kinds of ongoing issues. So Senator Lillian Dick says, look, this commissioner shouldn't be in the job. I would have said that for different reasons when she was first appointed. She was one of the top people in the Alberta RCMP when the High River gun grab happened. I didn't think she should ever get the job. I thought she should have been demoted along with a lot of other people after that. But she's in it now. She's since said that she believes that there is systemic racism within the RCMP. But again, if you're going to talk about racism, you've got to actually have deeds to go with it and not just mouth the words. And it seems like everyone, a lot of, the questions around this are just, will you say the right words, as opposed to, will you act the right way?
Brian, there was a time when many Canadians were excited with the fact that Harry and Meghan made BC their home. They came to Canada. It seems that they were only here for a cup of coffee, then moved to California. Their brief stay ended up costing Canada a fair bit of money.
Yeah, you stole my line, cup of coffee. You could get a lot of cups of coffee, a lot of double doubles with the amount of money that we paid. And this is only the partial bill that we know of so far. And this information comes to us from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. They found out that just the overtime and other incidental bills was $55,000. Well, that's just the overtime. Well, how much did the officers cost? How many officers were on the detail? They did not stay here very long. They were staying at the Vancouver Island estate of Frank Gustra, the guy who's into everything, mining, movies, all kinds of things. He's got a ton of money. He put them up, but we foot the bill for the security until they gave up their royal titles. And then shortly after that, of course, COVID was coming and they decided they'd rather be in LA anyway. I'd like the money back, Hal, just like they gave the money back for the renovations they did on the palace they were supposed to live in England. Maybe they could send us a check for this.
What's ironic is that COVID is not really as prominent on Vancouver Island, but in LA right now, when we talk to our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, it's rampant right now in Southern California. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
The energy sector is still reeling as the price of oil dipped into negative territory. It has devastated our economy in Alberta and a lot of Canada. David Yeager is an energy policy analyst and author of the new book, From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. He also recently wrote an interesting article entitled COVID-19 Will Greatly Reduce Support for the Anti-Oil Movement. David, welcome back to BCN.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now, you write about how the climate change and anti-oil movement started and how the power of social media, and politicians have really contributed to this. Can you explain in further detail, remembering that Bridge City News is not mainstream media?
No, but it is really a high water phenomenon. The most interesting book I read was called The Progress Paradox in 2003. And it was, how come when the world keeps getting better, everybody think it's getting worse? It's like human nature. But his comment was, Western society has been so successful, in part because of fossil fuels, that people had the luxury of being able to worry about how they felt. The basic necessities of food, shelter, clothing, and income were taken care of. So it was a society based on feelings and moods. So it's into this very successful society that you introduce climate change. What will the weather be like in the year 2050 or will 2100? And if you are, looking under rocks for food, or you're working 2 jobs to pay the rent, this is really first world issues. And so we've been most of this century, things have been going well. The society's been good. People have had jobs. People have had income. They could worry about less pressing things than the necessities of life. And that has all changed in the last 60 days. People are locked in the house, losing their jobs. The layoffs are huge. And so I'm just thinking that in the end, all the attention politically paid to climate change was successful because there was a lot of voter support, because everything else was taken care of. So my question is, in the last election, for example, in the article, I pointed out that 29% of the people thought that climate change was a major issue. I'd like to run that poll again in July and say, what is your major issue, and see if it even registers. So politics tends to go where the votes are. This is where the votes have been. My thesis is they will not be there in the immediate future for all the reasons we're starting to learn as we live through our lives in this horrid mess.
Now, you say that people are really easy to scare. Sometimes we rely too much on big government and forget how wealth is actually created.
Well, that's been the history of end of the world phenomena. If you know what to look for, if you go back to even Malthus in the 1700s, after the printing press was invented, he figured there was more people than there was food, and we were all going to die. Then it was Silent Spring in the early 60s with DDT, pesticides, we were all going to die. Then there was the population bomb and Paul Ehrlich in 1986. We were all going to die. And then the Club of Rome, we were going to run out of resources in the 1970s. And so there's a recurring phenomena through here, is it's almost a default element of human nature, is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so maybe it's in our DNA that we're actually worried about things like this. But so I guess we are easy to scare. And the COVID is a perfect example. 99.95% of the people of Alberta have not tested positive, and yet nobody will go near anybody. So perhaps it's human nature, perhaps it's overemphasized. But yeah, this is getting people to worry about what's going to happen next. It appears to be quite easy.
A lot of Canadians are being reminded, David, of what it takes to have a good economy. Alberta is getting hammered right now, as we talked about earlier. Oil prices in negative territory for the first time ever. The Liberals did offer a financial aid package, $1.7 billion towards cleaning up the abandoned oil and gas wells, another $750 million to cut methane emissions, plus some expanded credit lines for smaller companies. But how much of this will really help?
Well, it can't hurt. I'm just actually researching that right now, trying to understand how bad it is. There's nobody making money unless you've got your production hedged, which is forward sold. You cannot produce oil profitably at these prices. So everybody is hemorrhaging cash and cutting their capital programs. So you can't do too much assistance, or provide too much assistance at this time. The real issue has been, is this sufficient? And that's what people are worried about. I mean, the fact is, the government, it's a lot easier to respond to the COVID situation than it is to understand what you've done. Like, we have to quit moving, ground airlines, strand cruise ships, put yellow tape around the swing set at the playground so the kids can't come in contact with each other. Shutting down and locking down the economy is really quite easy, for all the various levels of politicians to sound concerned and have the police go around and give away tickets. The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how. So the thing is, the politicians today are much more able to recognize a problem and tell you what to do than they are to fix it. Just like climate change. We should quit using fossil fuels. Oh, good idea. Now what? Well, that's a little more complicated. So again, telling everybody nobody moves, nobody gets hurt, shutting down the economy, that was relatively easy compared to what it's going to take to prevent it from collapsing completely and bringing it back.
So, David, why is it that the Liberal Party is so hesitant to provide a major financial bailout to the energy sector like they did previously with the auto industry?
I think it's a lot more there's two elements. One is there's the politics in the sense that this is a party, a fairly polarized party on the subject of oil and climate change. They won the election in part on anti-oil climate policy. And so it's not intuitive that they should help these people. I would say that this particular government is not particularly gifted in the area of economic management. If you look at this particular crop, it's a tough time to have people with this little economic bench strength, if you will. The second thing is and this is in all fairness to the current governments at all levels, this is unprecedented. No one has ever dealt with anything like this. And so what do? I do know that the conversations between the Minister of Energy and the industry have been continuous with finance and the banks. Like, they know they have to do something, and they are asking for guidance on what to do. The question is what to do. So everybody, it's sort of like COVID. It's easy to say what not to do. I mean, say we need help. The government never said we don't need help. You're the only source of funds. The government has said they've never admitted that there's another source of funds. Check out your mattress, clean out your mattress. That's already been done. The question is, what do we give to who? So what I'm hoping is that as the gravity of the situation becomes more apparent, particularly at the federal level, what I'm hoping is they'll take tribal partisan politics. A lot of politics in the modern era, the reason people are so jaded about politics and politicians is they're more inclined to worry about keeping their job than doing their job. What I'm hoping is the current situation is so severe that it's time to start thinking about what's best for the country, not the next election. And I in phoning around, I think they're coming around to that. I sure hope so.
What's interesting too, David, is how many people are out there saying that they want to see the energy sector just die. Oil and gas just go away completely. Yet how many Canadians are aware that essential elements of personal protective equipment, life-sustaining equipment, right, like the gloves, masks, respirators, are all petroleum-based products, even the hand sanitizer?
There's an incredible energy knowledge and energy product information vacuum that has emerged. There was the idea that has been put forward, and really no one's heard, many don't believe otherwise, that all we need to do to replace oil and gas with wind and solar is political will. I mean, people communicate with each other on the way to the pipeline protest with a plastic phone. There's really no understanding of the supply chain, nor has there been any need to understand the supply chain. This goes back to what I was talking about, the progress paradox. Things are going well. Why do I have to worry about where things come from? I never run out of anything. There's been no shortages of anything. If I don't have a job, you got a guaranteed income supplement, like the ability to book off and go chase how you feel instead of how you got here or how you're going to stay here. It's been fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things the author, Alec Epstein, concluded. He says, I suppose if society's gotten to the point where the only thing they have to worry about is whether they're happy or not, he says, I suppose that's progress, and it is. So there's a giant, this goes back to the original question you asked me when we started this interview. There's a big reality check coming as people have more time stuck in the house. What is it? And so the people have time to listen to other narratives now. Where will my next job come from? And I'd say that right now, if the oil and gas industry could get back to work and people started to want to hire people, I can't imagine anyone's going to say, well, no, we'd rather you stayed at home. I mean, these jobs are going to be critical to the recovery of the Canadian economy.
It appears that some of the anti-oil support is coming from the younger generation, those people who grew up watching Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. Will this change their mindset from the idea that the mission of climate salvation is more important than the economy? Do you think that reality is maybe setting in for some people right now?
This is the first time they've had tough times, and why? I think this is the great question. Why is it? Why have I lost my job? Why has the price of oil collapsed? Yes, this is the fundamental change in your life and in your future that the shock treatment, I think, that people have been wondering, is this what we have to do? Do we have to starve everybody out to get their attention? Well, it's underway, whether we had to or not, whether it was intentional or unintentional. This is going to be a great learning moment for the generation that's really had more esoteric things to worry about. So I'm inclined to agree with everything you said. Yeah, you're going to learn where plastic comes from when you can't get it. You're going to, and so on and so forth. You're going to learn how important the oil jobs are because they don't exist anymore. And so as the deficit goes up, and it's all that's why I say I think what's happened is that the state of the economy, or the changes in the economy that this shutdown has created, is much greater than people's understanding of just what we've done here and how long it's going to take to turn it around. But that's happening at lightning speed, unfortunately, as more people lose their jobs and their savings.
So once the COVID-19 pandemic is passed and things return to some kind of normal, will the anti-oil movement go right back to pressuring governments to spend billions upon billions of dollars to shut down the fossil fuel industry and replace it with renewable energy?
There's two elements to this. There's the professional environmentalists that they do this for a living, and they're always looking from one crusade. If you go back in the book, I went back, the history of Greenpeace was in saving the whales and nuclear testing. It's the issue of the day. If it isn't fossil fuels, they'll find another one, and they'll morph because that's their jobs. The question is how is this going to resonate with the voters? It's not so much that there's always going to be an environmental movement. There always will be. There'll always be people that in this area advising us what not to do. The question is will politicians, in their hunt for votes, will this crystallize itself in voter support? That's what's happened with the climate change movement, is there's been discernible pools of voters emerge, and people have identified them. The Green Party, for example, Elizabeth May, she won more seats than ever on a platform to shut down the oil sands. Obviously, she didn't have any candidates in Fort McMurray. The Liberal Party has identified a loyal group of voters among the climate concerned. The question is not so much will there be pressure for them to worry about climate change from the environmentalists. That's one thing. The question is, will there be the voter support at the polls? That's my thesis. My thesis is that what the voters of Canada want the government to do next, that is what has changed.
Can you comment on the push for renewable energy and the goal we keep hearing, net zero emissions by the year 2030 or 2050? Is that realistic?
It's easier to say than do. I've talked to a lot of people or read a lot of material. Equinor is the old Statoil out of Norway, and they have adopted and of course Norway's thought as being uber green. And they have said, well, we're net zero by 2050. So then you have to go back and say, well, that's nice. Well, I tend to peel back the onion and read the story below the headline. And what they called that was a wonderful opportunity for research and development. Meaning we actually don't know how we're going to do it yet, and we're going to have to develop the means to do it. So the commitment is one thing, the means is unknown, and so there's no one has explained to my satisfaction how they're going to go net zero by 2050. It's just the path of least resistance has been the path of least resistance is just say you're going to do it and buy yourself a little fresh air. And 20 years, of course, that's or 30 years. The beauty of those who commit to net zero by 2050 today is 30 years out. They certainly, if they're not dead, they certainly won't be in the jobs they're in when they made the commitment. But no, I would say that the whole world is going to rethink this, is going to look at their priorities now. I mean, this is not just confined to Canada. This is happening all over Europe, all over the Western world. There's 7.5 billion people on Earth that are being impoverished in some way at the present time. That is the people to ask, not Greenpeace or not Justin Trudeau, what they think. What do the people of the world think? And this is a reset, I think, of priorities back to the basics.
David, we got 30 seconds left here. Quickly, what is your overall outlook for the Alberta energy industry?
We're not going away anytime soon. The one thing about low oil prices is they really have put an arrow through the heart of the renewables. Renewables need higher oil prices, not lower oil prices. I believe that oil's going to be around for a long time. We got a lot of it. We're going to make a big comeback. I just can't tell you exactly when.
Okay, thanks so much, David. David Yeager, energy policy analyst and author of From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.